nei Tarangi. Our Karakia is number 2 on the orange cards. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina kiuta. Kia mā taratara kitai. E hi ake ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauri ora. Cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south. Let the breeze blow over the land, let the breeze blow over the ocean. Let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened ear, a touch of frost, a promise of a glorious day. Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Perry. So I'd just like to welcome everyone here too. Thank you for attending. And do we have a full attendance? Oh, we do. Look at all those cheery faces. Okay, apologies. Do we have any apologies? None. We're all here. No apologies, thank you. Do we have any notices? No one got their hand up? We have no notices, thank you very much. Then we'll move to item 2, conflict of interest declarations. Any...
Guys, given we've done a work on this paper, and I think what you have in front of you now is a trimmer, tidier, more concise, and hopefully more clear version than the 1.5 hour dump we worked to.
Sure.
Yeah,
that's Basil Chamberlain, the CEO of the Karakia Regional Council.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was looking who's talking. How do we get that?
It seems to have disappeared. That's another meeting that I was supposed to be in at 9 o'clock. So I don't know how I've ended up in 2 meetings simultaneously, but it's gone, so we'll hope it doesn't come back.
Okay, Rick, would you mind sending Basil a text and saying we enjoyed his dissertation? Wow, that was really interesting.
And we're looking forward to being hosted by him shortly.
Yeah, send him that. Okay, he'll be stunned that we were party to that. Any conflict of interest? There are none, I presume. Thank you very much. So we'll move to confirmation of the minutes, the last minutes. You all have a copy of those. Has anybody got any issues on accuracy? No. Therefore, do we have a move of those minutes, please? Will, did you put your hand up? Thank you. Seconder. Jerif, thank you very much, Jerif. All those in favour? Aye. All those in favour? No one opposed? Thank you very much. Follow-ups from the previous council meeting, item 4. Jo, are you taking this? Who's taking this? Just follow-ups.
I can do if you want to. Just a second.
Chair, can I just suggest that we'll take these as read and happy to take any questions in relation to them. There is commentary in relation to each of the items as to where they're at.
Yeah, I agree. So any questions for any of our staff? None? Am I right on that? There are none. Thank you very much. Then we will move that the follow-ups are received. Someone move. Rick.
Follow-ups.
Sorry, sent by Henry Y. Thank you very much. All those in favour of receiving the follow-ups? Aye. Thank you very much. Item 5. Sorry? Did someone speak?
Apologies.
Yeah, Arpi. You're on mute, Arpi. Thank you.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. I didn't realise my mic was on. I was interrupting your flow.
Did you have a comment, Arpi, on the follow-ups? No, okay. Right, we'll move to item 5. We've moved and seconded the follow-ups, and we've voted on it. Significant activities, item 5. You all have read that?
So, Chair, just look, I'd note that the commentary in red reflects areas where the return to business as usual is being reflected. But look overall, given the fact that we are reporting weekly on this there is still a significant quantum of the report which hasn't changed from last week. And obviously from this week onwards, we're returning to normal monthly council meetings. And so you'll get a full, fresh report at the meeting on the 24th of June.
Thank you, James. Any questions on API?
Will the full report also include a comprehensive of the list of projects provided to central government? It's mentioned on page 17. Will there be another opportunity?
Look, I think we'll deal with that separately rather than just embedding it within the significant activities report. I would anticipate that the month-end report on the 24th of June will reference the work that we are doing around the central government COVID recovery funding, but there is a substantial body of work that we'll need to have deeper engagement with. And I'm currently in discussions with Peri, our Te Pau Whakaroa, around the best way to continue and engage tangata whenua in that. And indeed, Ian Maxwell is in that call with Basil that we heard a bit of before right now, which is the regional sector getting together with central government to develop a process to develop the funding mechanisms. So while the pots of cash were announced in the budget, the detail of how those funds will be allocated and to what sort of projects, that's the work which is going on at present. So we'll come back to you on that shortly.
Thank you, James. Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Neil, and then I'll come to you, Michelle.
Yes, thanks. James, I wonder whether I can take you to organisational activities regulation, compliance and enforcement, and just can you update on where you got to with the wastewater notices that you issued to local authorities and any actions or engagements with those local authorities over the past week or so?
I couldn't give you any update in relation to the Napier City Council outfall issue. I think Liz is on the call. No, Liz isn't on the call, I'm sorry. I did get a message from her this morning. She has a grandchild being born today, to look after her other grandchildren while that's occurring, and so she's not with us. So I will get an update from the team and send that to you directly, Councillor, after the meeting.
Great. If you could just include any dialogue that's taking place aside from the notices and the regulatory action, simply the conversations that had office to office conversations around the future.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, James. Michelle.
Hello, thanks, Rex. James, again, just as I see the river mouth's been open, and there was a bit of a concern about because it was sitting quite high in the lagoon, so I was just mindful of all that wastewater. Just for, I heard you mention this quite an expensive process, so it's just so that our people here in Wairoa know what cost it is to open the river mouth, because I get that request quite often.
Thanks, Michelle. So look, following our meeting last week, I had a meeting with Chris Dolly on this question, and we have had our engineering team up inspecting the Wairoa river mouth. And the upshot of that is that the work that would need to be done at the moment, given that the gravel crest is 5 metres in height above sea level, would be in the order of around $30,000 worth of digger time to create an alternative opening. The consequence of that would be highly uncertain in terms of its success, because given that the river is not actually blocked at the moment, there's not a positive head in terms of pressure from the river to the seaward side that would enable that mouth to continue to flow open, which is to say it could equally close quite quickly again, and $30,000 would have been spent for no good purpose. And the $30,000 would need to come from our Wairoa River Reserve, which we obviously keep there for emergency circumstances. Chris and I have discussed the prospect of getting an independent assessment redone of a permanent solution for the Wairoa River in terms of some groins structures. That was last considered in the 1980s, I believe. And so it was my proposal to put to the Wairoa District Council, to Mana Whenua up there and the community, whether or not you'd like to see that piece of work undertaken, given that it might cost in the vicinity of $100,000 to do a detailed study. That would also need to come from the Wairoa River Reserve, and at the end of it, we're likely to get a multi-million-dollar price tag for an intervention, which again the Wairoa ratepayers would need to pay for via a targeted rate. So happy to look at that more, but I guess the long and the short of which is that managing that very dynamic
river mouth
in the short term, and it will be expensive in the long term if we go for a more structural solution as well. So at the moment, there's no proposal to open the mouth further, unless it does become fully blocked and causes significant risk of flooding. Chris, have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, Chris.
thank you.
Yep, I think, James, you've adequately covered that. I guess it's also worth noting we have been sending our most senior staff member up there on a weekly basis to do an assessment, and he's got 45 years experience with Hawke's Bay Regional Council and the River Mouth. So we're certainly putting the effort into having understanding what the river's doing, and we're, through James's explanation, they're looking at what we can do. There simply are no easy, low-cost solutions available, but we're very much keeping a close eye on the river mouth.
Okay, just something to
Thank
note.
you,
And one more thing, James, with the infringement notice, what is the cost of that as well? For infringement notice for the wastewater?
Look, without it will either be $750 or $1,000, and I just don't have that specific number to hand, but it'll be one or either of those.
Okay, and one more thing they asked me was, when did that actually happen? Was it within that week? The where the wastewater went inland?
Look, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, but again, I'll get that detail and come back to you directly.
Thank you, Rex.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Charlie.
Yep, just along with the Wairoa River mouth, I think James or Chris, if you could explain that there's obviously another couple of more rivers or streams and drains that are cleared along the coast there, including Ohuia and Waihua, and there might be another couple up towards Nuhaka that are checked every year.
Yep, so those rivers are all continuously checked, and I know Nuhaka's been frequently
I'm sure
opened.
all our Wairoa people understand that. Yeah.
Chris?
That's a good point, Charlie.
I missed that second part, sorry.
You're on mute, Charlie.
Just for the Wairoa people, again, is that there's more than the Wairoa River, obviously, that gets cleared on a regular basis. There's also the ones up along the beach towards Nuhaka and maybe perhaps the Waihua River.
Yep. So Charlie, Councillor Lambert is correct there. A number of rivers have been, they're checked on a weekly basis, and Nuhaka in particular is I think been opened almost on a weekly basis as well over the last couple of months. So we're certainly very active up there in that area.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any other questions regarding significant activities? Martin, thank you. You're on mute, Martin.
You'd think I would have got that sorted out by now, wouldn't you? But look, just the Strategic Planning Group Managers update. There was by the look of it, a third Tuki Leaders Forum recently, if not yesterday. It looks like we've got a further report coming back and decision making on 10 June. Auckland Strategic. Is there anything that could be shared now as to how it went yesterday, Tom?
Look, I'm happy to. We've got two people here who are actually participants in that. I'm just an observer of that forum. So both Councillor Foley and Mike Parku attended that were in attendance yesterday, so I'm happy to defer to them.
I think we would like a comment from either Will or Mike. Will, you're looking at a smile on your face, and I can see you up in the top corner, so it's you.
The fresh haircut.
Fresh haircut.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Williams. So look, we're just going through a process at the moment, looking at if we were to be looking at various or different water storage options, what are the criteria that we would choose one over another. And so I guess just trying to really drill down to the detail of what all the stakeholders want out of a water storage proposal, so that when we get to, I guess, trying to nail it down to one or two options, what criteria do we determine that enables us to choose the better one? So yeah, look, we've had 3 meetings so far where we've defined the problem and now looking at the criteria. Yeah, so does that help?
Mike, would you add anything to add, Mike?
All I would add, Mr. Chairman, was our first time to come together face to face. The other 2 times have been across Zoom. As we all know, Zoom has its advantages, but one of the disadvantages, of course, is you're not all in the same room. I think we conversed a lot of ground yesterday. I believe it's a very positive process. I see it more as a high-level SWOT analysis process. Very, very positive. I look forward to getting to the end of the process and just see where we all land. I think it will be for the betterment of not only of Central Hawke's Bay, but also for the wider region, about the way we get there. Perhaps not so much the result, but how we get there, and the level of consultation and conversation that takes place to get there. So I'm very pleased with the process, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any other issues? Greg, was that a hand up? No. If you could, Uppy has, see how Uppy's got his hand up right, nice and clear? I can see him. If everyone could do that, I would appreciate it. Uppy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Question to staff. Page 19 refers to a paper going to Cabinet on Monday, the 25th of May, seeking funding for the RBP, which I assume is the Regional Biodiversity Program. Could we get an initial update on how that went? Or when might we be able to expect a report?
That's the Regional Business Partner Program, and so that's the funding through New Zealand Trade and Enterprise and Callaghan Innovation for business support, and that has been extended, as I understand it, in relation to the COVID-19 economic impact situation. Joe may be able to give us an up-to-date view of whether that.
Yeah, as of yesterday when I got the team's report, they hadn't heard. So as soon as they know, they'll let me know. But we definitely would hope that there'll be further funding.
Thank you very much. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a mover, please, to receive those updates? Thank you, Rick. A seconder, Neil. Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. We received it. Move to see the paper. Thank you very much. So, James, the CE's verbal update.
Thank you, Chair. So at the moment, the council is in what we describe as level 2 transition, and that's bringing back staff in a managed manner to our physical working environments. Last week, that started with small groups aggregated around designated bubbles. And as of this coming week, we will be moving to a one city bubble, which will include our Station Street, Raffles Street and Dolphin Street buildings as one. And so staff within those buildings will be able to interact with one another with appropriate distancing and also contact tracing in terms of the internal interactions as well as any interactions with the broader public. So look, we're continuing to steadily stand up our normal physical presence, I guess, in our buildings, but we still do have a significant number of staff who are working from home, where they are, I guess, able to be fully productive and effective, and are happy working from home at the moment. So that transition continues over the coming week, and we're keeping an eye, obviously, on guidance from central government as to when we can return to a higher level of normality in our functions. Our satellite offices in Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay are being manned at present, but we've got limited staff in those offices, just given that they're relatively confined spaces. And then Guppy Road, we're keeping as a tight bubble itself, with minimal interaction with the wider organisation, and that's particularly because of the critical nature of our Guppy Road staff to be available for an adverse event, and we just want to make sure that they remain fully operational and that there's no risk of a situation where, if there was a COVID-19 community transmission event that did impact on a member of that team, that it would result in having to stand down a large number of that workforce and have them off site. So other than that, things are going well. We're continuing to work with our regional partners around the transition from the civil defence welfare response to the caring for communities model. I understand that Cabinet was due to consider a paper on this on Monday, and we're now just Monday gone, and we're now awaiting announcements from central government as to the arrangements that are proposed around that new welfare delivery model. But in the meantime, services continue there, albeit there's relatively low demand for those as life starts returning to normal in our community. Perhaps just the final thing to say on the COVID front, obviously there's been work going on in relation to the annual plan and securing funding subject to consultation for recovery projects and job creation opportunities, and we're continuing to work closely with central government right now around those funding opportunities. And when we've got a better sense of those funding arrangements, we can then engage our regional partners, tangata whenua, our usual contracting community, the business community, etc., around what those funding opportunities mean for Hawke's Bay and how we can organise ourselves to take best advantage of those to create those employment opportunities wherever we can. So that's our COVID response at this time, Mr. Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, James. Questions for James? No questions. I guess we're all over COVID, James. We want to all get back there and get back to work, don't we? Okay, thank you very much. Do we have someone to move James's report? Rick, and a seconder. Craig, thank you very much. All those in favour of receiving James's verbal report? Aye, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move to minor items not on the agenda. And just to be clear, this is a report that you have got, and it's not going to last more than 5 minutes. Rick.
Climate change.
Thank you. It's a goodie.
It's a minor item.
Neil?
Mine will only take 10 minutes, Mr. Chair. Tank plan change consultation live streaming.
Yeah, thank you. That will take 2 minutes. Yes, that's right about that. Any other minor items? No other minor items? Okay, we will move on to decision item 8. And Anne, I see you're joining us. You've got a lovely view of Italian view behind you there, Anne.
Yes.
If only you were sitting in Sicily.
Where's that bus stop, Anne? I want to get on the go bus and get there. I got a gold card. Will get me there.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. The floor is yours.
Right, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll provide first a couple of quick updates that were mentioned in the item that we hope to have information by today. The first one of those is around the percentage of our normal patronage that we're carrying at the moment. We went level 2 restrictions, of course, meant, or level 2 changes meant that school children went back to school. And we started in earnest with that last week. And at the moment, we're carrying between 35 and 40% of our usual patronage. We do have restrictions on the buses in terms of social distancing, which is causing some difficulties at times. And we've had to put on a couple of extra buses in places to accommodate and ensure that school kids haven't been left behind. So that's on ours. We have 3 dedicated school services, but also on regular services that run, for example, between Napier and EIT and carry a lot of Taradale High students, for example. The second update is just that I had hoped that we would have a full response from NZTA about our funding proposals. We have had written confirmation that they support in principle the prospect of having the RITS system in place by the 10th of August, but they cannot yet confirm funding arrangements beyond the 30th of June for us, and that is because it's part of a broader 2021 public transport funding policy that they're still working through. That possibly sounds hopeful in terms of additional funding for public transport, recognising the trauma that we've been through in terms of loss of patronage and so on as a result of COVID. That's expected soon, but yes, they certainly can't give us any clear details about what funding we will get in the following year. I'll take any questions on the paper. Take it as read otherwise, or if there's any explanation required.
Questions for Anne? Craig.
My question is actually, thanks for the paper. It's actually at a higher level, just the context. As Anne said there, I think you're running around 30 or 40% of the normal patronage. But I think, and I note that there was a report 25th of September last year, but just I asked actually how much we receive in revenue and actually spend on public transport, i.e. the buses that we're talking about today. So they're just quite interesting numbers. At the end of the day, the gross cost per year of the service is 3.9 million, but the cost to HBRC after all the bits and pieces from NZTA, etc., is 1.3 million per annum, which again, that's fine and another discussion. But I read the earlier paper, and it was, these decisions were made for climate change purposes, etc. And so I thought that was interesting. And also this discussion around, difference in $4.10 or $4.26 in the fare, and let's just put all that aside, because there's a bigger question here. So you may be surprised, colleagues, that the annual seat utilisation of these bus services ranges from 51% on a few of the routes there down to 8% on another route. The overall utilisation that we're paying for of the bus services in 18-19 was 37%. So when we all see these buses going around with empty seats, we're trying to fulfill a service, a need, a social desirability, whatever it might be, but something's not working. And, essentially, and I know, routes change and there'll be exceptions, but overall, what's that? 63% of the seats that we're essentially paying for are not being used. And that just, in my book, unless I'm missing something, there must be another or better way, a more efficient way, because there's a bus being moved around empty, and or ratepayers' desirability for effectively use of the funds and taxpayers, as well as trying to fulfill a social need to help people move around. So it's really just, it's another discussion, I guess, a larger discussion, but and I know I think Councillor Williams started having a look at this a while ago, but just the context, you know, those buses, we fund them, we are funding empty seats, and every seat we don't fund, perhaps that's monies that could be better utilised to deliver on the intent that we're trying to achieve. Because I don't think anyone would think that those usage numbers are very good, regardless. And these are pre-COVID, obviously, numbers. So I guess that just having that kind of annual reporting of total seats we're funding and total use is very informative to me, as well as versus normal use. That's just the point.
Thank you, Craig. Before we go to Anne, that is the challenge that we've had around this council for as long as I've been there, and it's the challenge that our community has in terms of the way we're doing things, and you put it very succinctly there. And I guess it's going to get exacerbated by cheap petrol. Anne, have you got a comment, or there's probably no need to comment on it? I mean, we know your thoughts, unless you want to.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
Can
you
I
can.
respond to it, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I'll let Anne go first, and then Martin, you can.
Thank you.
But we don't want to get into a big discussion on this right now. And Craig's opened a Pandora's door box here. But Anne, and then I'll come back to you, Martin, but no one else. Anne?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, I mean, 8% is our lowest route, is abysmal, and it is one of the services that we are hoping to replace with an on-demand service, such as one is being trialled in Timaru very successfully so far. Definitely agree. The 50+ % occupancy is on our key routes between Napier and Hastings, and they do carry full buses and overloads at peak times, and this is always the challenge. Do you only serve the really high demand, in which case you could have 100% occupancy on one bus plus an overload, or do you continue to maintain a service right throughout the day on a certain frequency? And certainly off-peak, some of those big buses running around are, you know, have very few people on them, but across the span of the day, it averages out at 51–52%. So that is the challenge. We can't have two fleets. That's just not cost effective. So in order to cater for the peak demand, we have to run those same buses off peak, except in the cases of if we were going to then run to an on-demand trial service off peak, which is a whole different conversation and something quite new for New Zealand. But as I said, it is being trialled successfully in Timaru, and we're watching that closely.
Thank you. And Martin, can you keep it brief though, because it is off the paper?
Yeah, sure. Well, it is the public transport paper, and it links to the recommendation, Rex. So Councillor Foss has rightly raised the broader context. Can I just say we're on this? All right. I mean, I'd encourage Councillor Foss to review, if you haven't had the opportunity, the workshop session on transforming transport in the region. Public transport will be a big part of that. Planning's a big part of that. Encouraging some routes for public transport over cars as part of that. On-demand services rather than big, you know, clunky, underused buses as part of that. But just one other point before I finish. So please, that context is being addressed. It's a major priority for me and the Regional Transport Committee as a whole. There are, under New Zealand Transport Agency modelling, for every $1 spent on public transport, there are $13 of benefits in terms of reduced environmental emissions, deferred road maintenance, capital, you know, construction costs, those kinds of things. So the big picture does need to be borne in mind. If I could just say that, you know, it's for this reason that I'm backing option 1 in the paper. It may not be quite time to speak to that, but while I'm here, it's about actually increasing or incentivising greater patronage of our bus services by making it easy, by making the fare structure easy. There's an ideal opportunity to do that now with the likelihood, I think, of NZTA support for the transition to get us into this RIT system. And if we make it easy for people to use buses, the patronage levels will increase. The return on investment is more sustainable. It's a win-win all round. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
When we come to it, Martin, I'll ask you to move it, and you'll have already done your speech, so that's good.
I have.
Okay, are there any other questions for Anne or Martin to that point as our chair of this Transport Committee? Yes, Rick.
Are you looking for a seconder for Martin's resolution? Because I'm happy to second.
Martin jumped the gun on that, so we'll reserve you as a seconder too. I just want to make sure that everybody has had a fair chance to asking questions. But if they have, then we have a mover in Martin and a seconder in Rick, and Martin's already spoken. Do you want to speak again, Martin? Do you, Martin?
No, I just totally support option one. It's got 4 different reasons sitting behind it, and they're all logical and sensible.
Okay, Rick.
Long overdue.
Any other speakers? So just be clear, we're supporting option 1 here. No other speakers? All those in favour of the recommendation? Aye. All against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Okay. Sorry, did someone speak?
Just saying thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Anne. Thank you. And you can go back to a nice coffee in Sicily. Okay. We have item 13, which is adoption of the annual plan consultation documents. So if we could go to that, please.
Morning, Chair.
Yes, that's you, Jess.
That's me. So just a few introductory comments regarding the paper. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for the size of this paper. Normally we would split the paper into multiple items, one providing background information and one providing the information for decision today. Although it's a little tricky in these virtual meetings to switch between papers, so it has been consolidated into one paper for that reason. So it is fairly lengthy. A lot of the information you have already seen before. It's simply there to provide background for the decision making and to transfer some of those workshop discussions and content into a public paper. So we're asking you today to adopt the supporting information for the annual plan consultation and the draft consultation document itself. All of the attachments are attached to the paper. In addition, you will have received via email a communications plan and a brief presentation. I'm happy to, I've got Drew, our comms manager on the line here. He's happy to take you through that presentation if there are any sort of specific questions around the consultation itself or the comms plan. We're also happy to take feedback on the consultation document. The consultation document attached to the paper is in Word format, and we have circulated a draft designed copy of that annual plan consultation document, which came out last night. So there's quite a bit to cover, and I'm not sure if we want to go through the supporting information document by document, or we just want to take general questions in the first instance.
Yeah, it's a very big paper, and it's an awful lot of reading for everyone to do, and all the supplementary papers as well, Jess. I think we'll just take it as a whole. We have talked about, but there's a few decision items in the body of the paper, and so I'm sure there's going to be some questions around those. So we'll just take questions generally as a kickoff. Okay, so any questions on any of those on the paper, or any of the supplementary papers, supporting papers? Anyone, your hand up first? Yes.
Kia ora, thanks Jess and Drew for these. Now I'm looking at the consultation document that will go out to the public. I just wanted to ask, if I was to receive this in the mail, I'd want to know what it means for me as a ratepayer. So for instance, an average household who has a certain rate, what do the 3 options mean to me dollars-wise per year? Is there an opportunity in this document to put practical examples, or say the medium ratepayer, in terms of what the 3 options look like?
So that's would.
Chair, could you ask Neil to turn his microphone off, because he's shuffling papers there and it's causing a bit of interference, unintentionally, of course.
Thank you, Neil.
Just to clarify, so you're talking about it would effectively be some rates modelling of sample properties. We've got Bronda on the call as well.
Mm-hmm.
I might defer to you, Bronda, in terms of whether we traditionally would include that information in an annual plan consultation document.
So traditionally that's actually included in the supporting information. So in the funding impact statement that's actually attached, it's included in that. The challenge that we have is there is no such thing as an average ratepayer, which is why we actually try to include the samples in the funding impact statement to cover a raft of items. What we could do is point them specifically to the supporting information in the funding impact statement as part of the consultation document. And Drew, I can see you're taking notes, to be able to point them that to say, if you'd like to see how this would impact you, it will be available in that option.
Thank you. I think it'd just be practical for people to know really what they're looking forward to or planning to. Thank you.
What we in the long-term plan consultation, we had an online rates calculator where you could effectively go in and type your address, and it would give you your rates increase or your proposed rates based on the preferred options of the council. But unfortunately, we haven't had time to do that for this annual plan consultation. But that's something traditionally we do like to provide.
Yeah, that was excellent, Jess. That was an excellent tool when we did that. Rick.
Can I just make the observation to make Joe's day that on this bargain basement system we've got, I found a number of the charts in this document very hard to read. In actual fact, several of them were impossible to read. So I'm not going to say I'm not going to oppose it for that, but some of them you just put some of the where there were colorings and so on. Just even though you've opened it right up, you couldn't really tell what the numbers were. Very challenging. But anyway, all looks fine to me. It's to make that observation to help you think about this thing again sometime later, Joe.
Yeah.
Chair, can I just make the observation that it's for that reason that each of the main documents were also put into Stellar individually. And so we possibly didn't make that clear, that when they're consolidated all into one, the file size is such that it automatically reduces the resolution and does make it difficult to read. So to deal with that situation, Leanne took each and every slice of the main document and separately uploaded it. And I know that then becomes quite cumbersome because you've got to open and look at multiple documents. It's an issue that frustrates the hell out of me, and it's just something we haven't been able to resolve. And actually predates Stellar. It was more related to the Info Council software that we run. But look, we'll continue to see whether we can find improved ways of presenting the information.
Sure. Well, the best way is the old way. You used to send me a packet of paper, which I could read very perfectly.
Okay,
no
thank
problem.
you. Now, Harper, you're on mute.
Through you,
And
Mr. Chair. Sorry, I didn't hear you over the floor. Thank you very much. So fantastic work from the staff. I just wanted to acknowledge the effort you guys have put in to bring the annual plan forward for consultation, particularly over a COVID environment, once you chuck that on top of everything. And of particular note, I just wanted to mention reference to the staff's expression in the report around, while council didn't specifically ask for cost savings opportunities, staff nonetheless proactively sought those and have included a list. So that was greatly encouraging to see. And we just wanted to feed in around some of the aspects around tangata whenua engagement going forward. Really looking forward to some opportunities to be able to put that into effect across the regions and to continue to grow our understanding and space in those areas. So not so much a question as a comment, and a congratulations on the staff and their effort over the last couple of weeks and months. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou.
Thank you, Arpi. I'll go to you, Craig, then you, Neil.
Thanks. I just want to jump to the document itself. I think Drew sent it out. Thanks very much, Drew. You obviously pulled that together. Pretty short space. Also, the points in there and around the makeup of the increase, it's on the last page of the document, the changes to debt, etc. Just some of those little graphs and representations there, I think, are very informative for everybody and puts it in perspective. But my question is actually, how does this go out? This is a hard copy. I guess you're looking to somehow distribute that to everybody. And what response do you normally get, kind of percentage to what you send out, and what are you expecting? Albeit I appreciate we've got a tight timetable here. And then that follows up to the natural one. Is there an online option for people to participate in this and fill out the stuff that you've got there on your last page, etc.? And by the way, the way you put the preferred options, which I think reflects the discussions that we've had over the last couple of weeks, really, it's very good and concise and clear document, other than the questions I'm asking of Jess or Drew or someone, please.
I think, Jess, you need to answer that one.
Sure, I'm happy to. I see Drew's ready to jump in. So we're not intending to mail a copy of the consultation document itself out to all ratepayers. We're proposing to send a postcard informing ratepayers that the consultation is taking place and directing them to the online material. So we also will print a number of the documents, and for those people who aren't sort of native digital online users, they can call our office and we can post them or deliver them a copy of the consultation document and a submission form. So it's just a practical reason really why we don't deliver a copy of the document to each letterbox. One is just the timing in terms of the amount of time it would take to get them printed, and then also quite a significant exercise to get these posted out to 70,000 plus ratepayers. So we won't be sending a document to each home, but each home will be alerted to the fact there's a consultation taking place, and everyone will have an opportunity to read the material. And yes, there is an online submission form.
Well, that's key right there. So
Drew, do you wish to comment further?
The only further, thank you, Chair. The only further point I'd make is that we will have copies at the Regional Council's 4 offices across the region, and also in the 8 public libraries that are distributed around the region as well.
Thank you, Drew. Does that answer your question, Craig?
Yeah, look, by and large, at the end of the day, it is actually a large document which people will receive, and someone going to the mailbox, getting a postcard, comprehending it, and opting in either a phone call or an email. There's lots of points of action they've got to do to participate and make their feelings known in a instantaneous kind of world that we have now. So I guess it comes down to how people become aware of that, where the online link is, and the easily clicked and filled out, and you can go read the document. If you can just help us distribute that or understand that as you go through it, that would be great, because the more people that participate in this, as always, the better, and the more informed decisions we'll be able to make. Drew,
you want to add to that?
Yeah, I've just got a further point to make there. Thank you, Chair. Just that we have a further social media program behind this as a part of the communications plan, and there will be in excess of 20 posts that each are boosted and further promote not only the consultation document itself and all of the supporting information, but also the digital engagement opportunities, of which there will be 2, and so that we can encourage people to engage with us as fully as possible through that digital platform.
Thank you. Neil.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. There are 3 topics that I want to cover, perhaps take one at a time and do it in rotation. But the first comment I'd make is that the consultation document, and if we look at page 8 of it, it refers to the organisation, the very first paragraph, decision-making in response to COVID-19 and the drought. And yet there's no reference in the document to the drought. What our strategy is for the drought. So I'm wondering whether we either need to change that first paragraph to COVID, the 2 issues, COVID-19 response and climate change, perhaps, if we're not going to talk about the drought. So that's just one comment. The other one is if they are the focus, the 2 topics are the focus. One is the if you like, the rate shift, and the other is the recovery fund. Therefore, those issues need to be explored further. And I go back to Councillor Ormsby's query around what are the impact on rates of the rate adjustment that we're consulting on. So I would have thought, even though I appreciate that we've got mechanisms to examine what the impacts are on ratepayers, I think given that that's the main topic, we ought to have included an additional page setting out the impacts on different types of ratepayers as a consequence of the decision. So people need to know what the consequences of their consultation are around. So I'd make that observation. But Mr. Chair, I want to go back to the paper and to paragraphs 44 to 47 under the recovery plan, because I've got a couple of questions for Jess and or James around this. And I go to paragraph 44, which says the consultation is about the establishment of a regional council recovery fund of $1 million. It is proposed to be debt funded for capital expenditure. Can you confirm that the intent is only for capital expenditure? I would have thought that a number of the projects would have operational expenditure attached to them. Can you comment on that, Jess?
Just quickly trying to find the paragraph you're referring to. Sorry.
It's in your paper.
A multitude of tabs open here.
Yeah, paragraph 44.
Yep, I can confirm. The $1 million is proposed to be used for capital project purposes in terms of capital expenditure, debt funded.
So by that, it means that if there are operational expenses in a project, a shovel-ready project, an operational expense, then that would not be funded. Can we be clear on what capital and operation means?
Chair, perhaps I could perhaps comment here. Look, the first point is that this funding has been reprioritised from planned capital expenditure that was debt funded. So we're not proposing to add to the operational expenditure of the organisation. We're repurposing existing capital expenditure in the existing long-term plan. The second point to make is that doesn't necessarily preclude that funding going to pay for wages or personnel. It doesn't necessarily have to be paying for physical assets themselves. It's just to say that those wages or personnel costs would need to relate to the creation of capital assets, if you like, which might be, a regional park, for example, that involves, a whole bunch of. It could involve planning work for a regional park expansion. It could involve design work, etc. So they are all capitalised. If you like. Yes.
So the project itself is capitalised. Is that what that says?
That's correct.
Yes. Can I now go, if I can, Mr. Chair, to paragraph 46? The recovery fund would only be used to supplement any co-funding from central government. I'm curious to know how we've migrated our earlier discussions, which were much more encompassing or flexible in considering a range of COVID-related recovery projects, how we've now constrained ourselves down to only those that central government co-fund. I'm uncomfortable that we've tied ourselves down in that way, and I'd ask that we actually adjust the language so that it provides more flexible opportunities other than to supplement any co-funding.
Chair, can I suggest that is a choice for council? We're proposing that it be tied to leverage funding. So I guess the intention here had been to maximise leverage from the council's balance sheet, and we are aware that there is a significant amount of funding being proposed from central government. But if council would like the flexibility to be able to go beyond that, then that's very much your choice to do so, and we just need to reflect the consultation documents accordingly.
Well, Mr. Chair, I wonder whether other councillors might have a view as to a slight adjustment there. It would mean a bit of a rewrite in the consultation document, because it does on page 9 talk about leveraging government funding for shovel-ready projects. So we would need a subtle change in the wording of those. Is there any other view around how we might do that if we wanted to?
Well, just before you do, that, Neil, Rex is frozen and out of the picture. So before I go further, I'd like to get from James an explanation of what the implications would be for government funding if we change that language. So we are saying at this point, we're only going to put this money up and expend it if we get leverage off this. So if we take that out, is it going to be more or less attractive for government funding? James?
I don't think making a change to the policy position or the consultation document will have an impact on the attractiveness of the Regional Council as a funding partner for central government per se. However, if we redirect a significant proportion of the 1 million away from leverage opportunities, that will diminish the amount of funding we are able to leverage from the Crown. That would be the consequence that we would assume. And look, it might be worth us understanding whether there are particular projects that councillors have in mind that we may be able to fund other ways within the existing annual plan work program that doesn't need to impact on this $1 million, if there is something that's in mind.
Okay, I call Craig, then I'll have Martin. Craig.
Thanks, Rick. I specifically remember, I think when we were talking about this, James, we were wondering how much of that previously allocated 3 mil to move over 1 mil, and you were quite specific in our discussion in that this may be 50-50, or actually, given the quality and the urgency of some of the projects, we may be able to leverage that significantly more contingent on. I mean, I do take Neil's point, but my understanding is this is part of our skin in this game and our ongoing engagement with the various government requests. I also think your point right at the end there, that it doesn't mean we can't look at some of these other projects under some other guise or line item. It's just that's how you've landed in that space. And that's how I recall the discussions. This is all about the partnership with central government as we go through, particularly these COVID-ready projects in that little box.
Martin?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's simply a matter of not wanting to miss out on something that might be of benefit to the region, but equally getting the maximum benefit for our buck, which is leverage. And I'm wondering if the solution to this is that the consultation document, the heading, instead of saying leverage government funding, take those words off and it's just funding for shovel-ready projects. And then the first paragraph is the recovery fund of 1 million has been reallocated. You know, where we will give a priority to leveraging government funding to get the maximum benefits from this. Or we may decide to apply this to a project that assists the recovery in the region regardless, but so that we're keeping that discretion within the scope of what we've consulted on. I think that way, when we're presented with a specific opportunity, you know, we can make a decision. Do we forego the possibility of leverage because it's just such a great idea with great job benefits? And there has been a lot of uncertainty around the government's funding position. You keep stressing that to us, James. We don't know what the metrics are and the criteria. So yeah, just slightly reframing that as a funding for shovel-ready projects, COVID recovery fund, with a likely priority on leveraging to get the maximum opportunity from it. But it may be for projects that we decide to fund in our own right. That's just a thought.
Chair, look, I'm not uncomfortable about us introducing that degree of flexibility. Look, we framed this particularly around leverage because that was a strong rationale to take to the community for the repurposing of these funds, that there are additional funds on the table from central government, and therefore it makes sense. But look, there's a standalone rationale for this in any event, which is contributing to the regional recovery. So look, I think it's fine both ways. I would make the observation that given the quantums of funding indicated by government in budget 2020, our $1 million is relatively modest, and we do have the potential to access many times that potentially, and so I think we could well and truly allocate this full $1 million to leveraged projects and some. So you know, to some extent, I don't think we're going to have a problem having these funds allocated. We still don't have full clarity from central government, as has been noted, around the leverage requirements. In the case of one fund, Provincial Growth Fund, this week I was advised that the current discussion is around a 20% contribution locally and 80% coming from the Crown. And while that remains a little fluid, it gives you a sense of the sort of leverage that the Crown's looking for.
So if I just sum this up, my sense of it is that Councillor Curtin's asked for some flexibility at the other end. Your pitch is that the opportunity here, and I guess the public's expectation, given the rhetoric out of Wellington, is that we would target these funds and to get some leverage. And if your numbers are right, and we put up $1 million and we get 4 for that, so we're talking about $5 million worth of projects. Why would we go for projects which cost us $1 million when we could go for projects for which we can get funded for $5 million? It just seems nuts. But on the other side of it, if we aren't able to utilise all of the $1 million, then Councillor Curtin's point comes in. Well, there's other projects we might want to fund ourselves. And I guess underlying this is that this is a conscious choice by council to either go it alone or go with leveraged funds. And every decision we would make where we dip into the $1 million, it then diminishes our ability to attract leveraged funds. So I think the way forward is to make sure we continue to have the leveraged funds and then have the caveat at the bottom of that. But council also would like to have the discretion decision making to be able to utilise these funds for projects which it deems fit without leverage. Does that cover your point, Neil?
Yes, thanks, Rick. Yes, it does. The issue I'm really going to is we've got a long way to go, as everyone will be aware. We're just in the early phases of crisis, and I'd just like to think that, say, 6 months down the track, that if it's not a shovel-ready project co-funded by central government, well, we do need to step in and assist, distressed folk in other parts of the economy, other than simply which those projects are focused on, if you like, employment. If we need to step into other realms with urgency, we ought to just leave that opportunity for us to do so. So that's where I'm coming from with that making that point.
Points made. I think we've captured that. Have you got a clear steer there for that, James, and the team to redraft? If so, let's move on.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Rick, if I can come back later, let someone else have a go, but I want to consider the remission of rates issues on chapter or paragraphs 89, but I'll come back to you on that.
That's your 4th point in addition to your 3 you've had. Martin.
Look, I just turned my video off and meant to turn my mute. Probably would have been better if I'd done both. But anyway, I wanted to make first a question. The staff, the wonderful staff who put this paper together under the circumstances that Api spoke to, are you inviting specific comments on wording? Because I have got a couple. Okay, I'll get to that. But before I do, I just wanted to, I guess, put some light on the bigger context that's illustrated by the options in our annual plan document. Essentially, we're asking the ratepayers to make a choice. Do they want some immediate relief, but with the effect of that really being a postponement? In other words, the rate increase it's not magicked away. It's going to be deferred 1 year. And what we're going to be borrowing, as I see it, over 10 years is the shortfall in income from non-rate sources. That's the 6.1 million. So, and we're also borrowing over 10 years the 1.5 million that is the rate increase that would have happened this year. But then next year, that 1.5 million rate increase kicks in, and for subsequent years. And so next year, we're looking at a 10% rate increase on an average basis, as, if you like, the price for some immediate relief. So I think ratepayers are being asked, and we need to be very clear in our consultation, that this is the choice for them to make. Do they want that relief now or next year, effectively, or in the years beyond? And I think that's an appropriate question to be putting to our communities, because they'll best know the answer to that. But there's no free lunch here. We are smoothing the borrowing of the $6.1 million shortfall in revenue from other sources. I get that, but we're not so much smoothing unless we make some changes to levels of service in our long-term plan next year. We're not smoothing the rate increase, we're just deferring it a year effectively. Am I right in understanding that that's the picture and the question that we're putting to our communities in this respect?
That's correct.
Can I flick it over? Oh, sorry, Jessica, to you.
Yes, I think you've framed that very well, Councillor Williams.
All right. Well, with that understanding, so I think it's great, and I just would encourage, whether it's in our online meetings or in our communications that are specific on Facebook, you know, your choice. Rate relief this year, rate relief, you know, because we've got an assumption in here, and it was one of the specific changes I had in mind, that, and now of course my document won't move, that it's this year. Hold on a second, if you just bear with me. We've got an assumption in here that, bear with, that it's next year, that it's this year where the relief is most needed. And I'm not sure that that's correct. And I'm wondering if we don't want to soften that language. It says here on page, well, under cushioning the impact, our preferred option. This lessens the financial impact on ratepayers now when the impacts of COVID-19 and the drought are at their worst. Now, I really do think we might need to be saying when the impacts of the drought and COVID-19 may be at their worst. Because I'm hearing in the drought space that if we're not growing any food this year, you know, this could be a 2-year problem. And that's certainly what I'm hearing in terms of discussions about W's and J's and V recoveries, but, you know, L's or whatever it might be, in terms of, you know, it could be a 2-year issue. It's the end of 21 when I think the economists that I'm listening to are saying we're starting to, you know, see some daylight. So just maybe soften the language to maybe at their worst, and make sure we're quite clearly presenting that choice to the communities. I did have a couple of other more sort of specific drafting issues. I'll only raise one. Perhaps I could raise a couple of others offline unless you want to hear about them. But they are that where it says under extraordinary times, why we're consulting 2 proposals, it says we have 2 proposals for you to consider. I read the following paragraph and I thought, well, what was the second proposal? Because it sort of all reads as one, and I'm just wondering if it should say, first, we can give some relief to ratepayers through our approach to rate charges while debt failing, etc. And then it could say, second, we also propose to establish a recovery fund. I just think making it clear that there are those two elements, that they sort of morph into one at the outset. Otherwise, I thought it was a really good document. It's really clearly explaining things, but just presenting that element of choice.
Well, could I just firstly come back to that? I think the issue that Martin's highlighted, I didn't quite pick it myself, is that we've conflated the recovery from COVID-19 with the drought. They're 2 different aspects. And the issue here is that when we proposed a 0 rate increase for this year, it was in response to COVID-19. That was the sole primary driver. And Martin is correct, is that my experience of droughts in Hawke's Bay has been that the general view, people say, is you have the drought one year and then you have the financial drought the following year. So when the drought occurs, people get rid of their capital stock to make all the changes. And when they sell them and do that, they get money for it. But the next year, they're then having to buy capital stock, and they don't have the capital stock to raise, so the financial drought hits the following year and the year after. They've got two different phases, and by conflating the two, I think we make a mistake there. I think we decide the council's decision about rate increase was driven solely by COVID-19. I thought if we reflect that more strongly, then we'll get ourselves into a better position. All right, anything else?
Do you want to come back my way?
Supplementary question, Neil Curtin.
Thanks, Rick. I just want to quickly go back to the paper, and I mean Martin's points.
Paul, could just stop you there. Leanne or someone, could someone text who's on the phone? Text Rex the password to get back in. He sent me a text saying he's struggling with the password.
I'll do that, councillor.
Thank you. Right, Neil. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Rick. Look, just quickly in passing on Martin's point, and I think it's a very valid one. Otherwise, our whole approach becomes somewhat disingenuous. That we're putting it out there about COVID relief, and we are pinning our colours to one mast, and that is a delay of a zero rate increase, which has marginal effect on lots of ratepayers, when we haven't essentially thought through what the consequences are. And that's part of the reason for making the point about the flexibility in that recovery fund. I think that may be our saviour. And I just want to go, Deputy Chair, to paragraph 89, Jess, of your paper, and that's to do with the remission of rates. And I just want to be clear, have we got enough tools in the toolbox to offer remission in extenuating circumstances? I'm not confident that we have got sufficient armoury there to recognise that a number of our ratepayers are going to be in distress, and we need to respond both from a policy position and our policy around remission, and from the money we've put aside for remission. Have we got enough in there? And the second part of that, should in fact we be making that point in the consultation document?
So I'll just respond briefly, and then Rhonda, feel free to jump in. In terms of our remission policy, primarily the way that we would normally fund remission or relief of rates is off the balance sheet from a reserve fund. So we haven't budgeted within the profit and loss or the P&L for the 2021 year a specific amount or a pot of money to provide rates relief or remission. Traditionally, our preference or our view has been much more around postponement and working with ratepayers to implement or introduce a payment plan which is appropriate to their circumstances. And that may include postponement over later years. So for people who are in extreme hardship and can't afford to pay any of their rates this year, we could look at postponing and recovering those rates over, say, the next following 3 rating years. But our preference is always to work one-on-one with ratepayers and understand their circumstances. We certainly wouldn't apply penalties.
Yeah, I'm back.
To anyone.
Thanks, mate.
All right. Bye.
We wouldn't apply penalties to anyone who's called and had a conversation with us. It is a really challenging topic, an area to get right. I think it's difficult, even if we do identify a specific amount of money that we want to utilise to offer rates relief or remission. It's very difficult to put together the criteria and pick and choose those people who do meet the criteria, and you're always going to have people who meet it and those who just miss out. And then effectively you're deferring the cost of those people who you're providing relief for across the remainder of ratepayers, including those people who just missed out or didn't meet the criteria. So it is a challenging one to get right. I have suggested that we bring a paper to you to the next council meeting to focus specifically on this subject, and we can go through it in more detail. But that's the current position. Rhonda might be able to add some more detail around the current policies and how they might apply this year.
Well, before you do that, I just think the thing about here, Neil's raised an issue which is about a general policy we have on rates remission, which I don't think is actually an annual planning matter in itself. The second thing is that Jess has made the point that it is generally judged on a case-by-case basis rather than as a class action. It seems to me that when we're setting plans, we're setting public policy, and it applies to all. Unless we're going to change by way of this document, which I don't see we're doing that here, our rates remission policy in some significant way, then I think the matter's best left until you come back to us with a document about the rates remission policy, as you suggested, next week or the week after. We can have a discussion about that specifically. I'm not sure how it quite fits in with the annual plan, the plans.
Well, can I help you there?
I don't know that you can help me, but you can try.
Well, look, the whole point that I'm trying to raise is that we inevitably will have a substantial crisis of monumental proportions not seen since the Depression. And I don't think we've made sufficient provision for those ratepayers who are going to be substantially distressed, and those households that already, we're seeing the unemployment figures creep through. If you think Hawke's Bay is immune from that, well, you're dreaming. We will see that trickle become a flood within the next few months. So my concern is our rates remission policy, and I think Jess has answered it, essentially is not cut, is not intended for this purpose, to meet the purpose of this crisis. So therefore, should in fact we be putting in other measures and making other provisions to meet that challenge, 6 to 9 months. I mean, it's the families in Flaxmere and Māori families all around the place that are going to be first on the dole queue, and we're going to have a problem. So at least we can make a provision and have consult on a provision for recognising the problem. And so I'm really, I mean, you're quite right, Rick. Our current remission policy stands aside. It's not really fit for purpose for this intent. So what else do we need to do to meet this challenge? We can either put it in the $1 million fund and do something there, or we can put it somewhere else. All I'm saying is we need to put it in there, say we're putting it in there, and make that provision.
Well, I have to say, Neil, regretfully, I wasn't convinced by that. The point about this is we don't know what we don't know. I don't want to have an argument about this, but individuals will make their own determination as to whether they can or can't. If they wish to have a rates remission, well, then they'll ask us about that. There'll be an individual assessment. And over a period of time, we'll get some indication of how large system drains is going to be on the council with unpaid rates which have been remitted. What we do have is we have reserves from which we can meet nearly all of this. If we were teetering on the edge of insolvency, I'd have thought this was a significant issue. But given our circumstances, well then, if people in large numbers are unable to pay their rates, and we agree with them on that, well then we'll just have to figure out how we balance all of that with our accounts. We have sufficient reserves to do that. I'm not sure what more we can do today on that. Is that how it works, James? Over to you.
Chair, look, I want to be absolutely clear with councillors that there are two issues we're talking about. One is remission, which is the forgiveness of rates for any given rating year, and so a write-off of those rates. And the other is postponement. Now, our postponement policy does allow people to pay their rates off over time where they are enduring significant financial hardship. But we don't take a position of remitting rates per se, except for Māori freehold land that isn't able to be utilised, or where there is a natural disaster that renders that property unusable or a portion of that property from a slip or a land erosion event. It doesn't extend to drought, for example. So that's where there's a permanent impairment to the land as opposed to a temporary impairment from a drought, for example. The remission that we do provide is in relation to penalties. So what we do enable is the waiving and writing off of penalty fees where there is circumstances presented that justify that. For example, if somebody didn't receive their rating invoice for some reason, or there was a change in property ownership and it went to the wrong person or something like that. So our current policy quite firmly doesn't allow us to forgive rates for somebody who is enduring severe financial hardship. And it is our advice to you that we should not entertain such a policy because of the extraordinary administrative complexity and equity issues it gives rise to in trying to determine those who should receive a rates write-off. It is possible, and there are councils I'm aware of who are entertaining the idea of setting aside a fund and then inviting people to, I guess, apply. And then some committee of council is going to have to trawl through the individual financial circumstances of each of those households and draw a conclusion as to whether or not they should be remitted their rates. I think it does give rise to significant equity issues. And so our position at the moment is to support households in difficulty by going through a planned rates repayment program over time. And we tend to be very flexible about that, but ultimately the rates due are the rates due. And it's a very similar situation to taxation. And ultimately, to be clear, if people are unable to pay their rates and becomes sustained over a period of time, then we will collect those debts from those households. And ultimately, to be clear, on occasion, what this has resulted in us using our powers to forcibly sell a property and return anything that's over and above what's owed to us to the homeowner, which is a draconian step, I know, and it is one we have only taken in the most extraordinary of circumstances. But ultimately, we do not have the flexibility to forgive people their rates at the moment, which is why there's no budget provision in the annual plan for that.
That's why we need one.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair. And with the chair back, good to see you back, Rex. I just wondered if we could bite this off in 3 chunks. We're dealing with the annual plan now, and we're operating within the constraints of a long-term plan. We can't depart too far from it. We're doing what we can within the consultation envelope of an annual plan, and that's the rating relief and the $1 million fund. That's chunk 1. Chunk 2 is we were consulting on a rates remission policy variation to deal with the September date at one point, and there's something in here about the penalties not kicking in until after January. Maybe what we can consider over the course of the year is Ubering up the rates remission policy or rates postponement policy to anticipate hardship yet to come. That could be chunk 2, but a separate exercise, not conflated with this one now, because I think we need to get this out the door. Chunk 3, you know, we've got a really strong balance sheet still, and we'll have. There may be some opportunities as the paper notes to even smooth the forecast 10% rate increase next year by providing rate relief this year. Equally, if we're in the type of strife that Neil foreshadowed, we've got a long-term plan then where we can really take the whiteboard out and look at how we use our balance sheet to support our community. So that would be chunk 3. And I'm just thinking I think we're in a pretty good place on chunk 1 at the moment, and that's just a suggested way forward on the bigger picture.
Well, thank you. That's in line with what I think Jess was suggesting before. We've got our plan. We need to forward with a plan. The issue of rates remissions, rates relief, etc., is being foreshadowed by Jess as a separate paper for later. I think that's exactly where it should come from. It's a policy decision by council, and I think we should have a separate discussion on that. This is kind of out out of the plan consultation proposal. So Neil can then come back to us with his points he wishes to remake again at that later date.
No, it's in the paper. Yeah, it's in. Look at the paper. It's in there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
just to be fair to Councillor Curtin, I think we need to be realistic about the fact that when we bring back a paper on this, there won't be funding provision in the annual plan for some significant policy change that involved council remitting some significant volume of rates due. So you just need to be aware that, yes, we'll have a further conversation about this, but we're not anticipating the need to make provision for a significant loss of revenue for this purpose.
And on that, I would be opposed to us foreshadowing a significant loss of revenue and setting aside a significant sum of money for lost revenue for rates, because any statement to that effect, I'm sure it would be well and truly oversubscribed. It would be inviting a problem, in my view. So anyway, Rex is back. I think we're getting to the point of...
Mr. Chair?
I think for continuity, Rick, you should continue this paper.
Okay. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. And look, I back the way Deputy Chair summed that up. I think that I am absolutely in agreement with his earlier premise, and that actually at this annual plan, at this level, we do have policies. Maybe they need to be tidied up, changed, amended, or whatever, and before particular circumstances. And so we'll just wait and see. But there's one item that no one's really mentioned here in this context, is the Crown in its recent budget has announced various things post-COVID and has $20 billion of yet to be announced projects, processes, assistance, or whatever it might be to assist in this space. So I think it's very wise for us just to wait and see what they end up coming with, which may be very, very targeted or not, I don't know. But in the meantime, I think we've done a pretty good job of signalling we have a preferred landing zone for this rate increase. And let's just wait and see, because anything the Crown actually does, it's going to dwarf whatever rate increase or short-term decisions we're making. And I have an open mind, but I'm also knowing that there's a much bigger checkbook in Wellington in this space. And so let's just maintain the freedom we have to make more informed decisions once we know what they're doing for the betterment of Hawke's Bay, and we'll be more informed about the result or the impact of the drought upon the region ourselves, remembering, as someone noted earlier, that this entire piece of work started pre-COVID pre-drought, the impact of that. So we don't know what we don't know. The Crown has got a big checkbook in this space. Let's just wait and see what they're going to do.
Yeah, okay. In support of that, we have been advised by officials in Wellington that consideration is being given by Cabinet to an expansion of the rates rebate scheme. And so that may well draw on the 20 billion provision the government has made, and would apply obviously nationally, and may provide a greater level of rates relief for those who are most disadvantaged by the economic circumstances.
Okay, can I just look for someone to Hinawai, do you want to? Yes.
Could I just make a suggestion to Jess and Drew? With the consultation document, next to the options, we have a nice big, red light of preferred option. And I suppose my question is, if you want to mention how councillors' views have been, that be commented somewhere else in the document, and not allow it to possibly bias the options, that the public will look at them and maybe feel there's predetermination around which option is best. So I'd like your feedback on why you have preferred option next to the options, and suggesting whether or not a separate short kōrero about where councillors have got to is actually more appropriate.
So we are required to state a preferred option in all of our consultations, so it is an LGA requirement. And we've found that in the past it's challenging where, you know, council have been open to, and there is no predetermination of a decision. We are still required to identify the preferred option. And also that's what the financial statements and supporting documentation has been prepared based on. So we do need to be quite clear on what our preferred option is. I'm not sure whether Drew's got any further comment around how we can address or make comment in the document that council certainly hasn't made any decision, but that is a requirement.
Yeah, I mean, that is an additional statement that we could make, but I think we have been challenged by audit when we've been through the audit process with these documents in the past, that we've been asked to make it very clear that that is the council's option, that is the preference that we've taken. So yeah, as Jason said.
And to answer, it might seem like a rather difficult thing to do, but Councillor Ormsby, but the audit office has seen on occasions in the past where councils have put up multiple options for consultation, and then out of the scrum picked the one they wanted and run with it, and the public have been left a bit bemused as how they got there. So over time, experience has required councils as leaders to make decisions, to lead, to set out what it is that they see as the preferred option, their decision, so the public can then measure their views against that. They've got a clear target. So I think how we should phrase this in a way is that we should have a clear option. This is what council prefers. But on the other hand, if the public disagrees, then we go back to this option over here. So they can have very, very clear choices, say, well, we don't agree with you, but in saying they don't agree with us, they then know exactly where we're going to land on that point. So it's not a choice of an A or a B, it's we disagree with that, and as a consequence, we're here. But I think if we frame it that way, we will be in pretty safe space. Before I ask a resolution, has anybody else got a question we covered now? Right, well, James.
Sorry, Chair, I just would like to make a comment at this point in the process. The first of which is, if you look at the activities summary within the main document itself, I think it's an excellent summary of the major projects across all of the council's major functions for the coming year, and we'll be using that as a basis for engaging the community over the coming period about what it is that the council does and is achieving. But the main point I wanted to make was just a thank you to the teams involved, the finance team, the strategy team, and the communications team. It was only 2 months ago that we were planning not to consult on an annual plan. This has been an extraordinary effort to whip up an entirely revised annual plan and all the associated documents and consultation materials. There's been lots of long hours being put into this, and I just want to pay tribute to the staff and thank them very much for their efforts in getting us to this point.
I support all of that, James. That's exactly right. Could I just be in closing, ready to go to a resolution, just to pick up the point made by Councillor Foss. We live in pretty uncertain and unpredictable times because no one knows how this is going to play out. So we need to have flexibility and be prepared to move at the best and most advantageous opportunity. Secondly, in terms of shovel-ready projects, we might have shovels for shifting money around, but what Wellington has is bulldozers and great big dump trucks. We're small change in this thing, but there's plenty of opportunities there for us. And if we have to go back and revise what we've allocated and how we do it, well, I think this council's nimble enough to go and do that. And if we've got a good argument, the public will support us. So I've got no problem with where we're at. This, in my view, is the best proposal we've got with the knowledge we have and the circumstances we've got. And the staff, as James has put up, said, done a magnificent job of pulling all this together. So would someone like to move? I'll move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Jerv? Any further discussion?
You're asking for speakers?
Well, yes, you would like to speak, Councillor?
Yeah, I will. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. This annual plan is proving to be somewhat disappointing to me. I'm not going to support it. I am disappointed that an opportunity has been there to really send a strong signal that we are on the side of our ratepayers, we're on the side of our community, and yet we've landed with a meek and mild document. There's not a reflection on the staff's excellent work on this. In fact, the staff have faithfully followed their guidance of their governors and have produced a document that reflects the meek and mild thinking of the governors in this instance. The central government has come to the party and had created a really bold approach. They've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at the issue, and here we are, seducing our ratepayers into accepting a zero increase in rates, deferring it to the time, in fact, when they need to be most mindful of their costs. So that's a great disappointment. The other one is a recovery fund that actually doesn't recover much at all in reality. We ought to have been much more bold in setting the parameters for the recovery fund and making it available for all the issues that are going to come down the pipeline. The third thing I'd like to say, Mr. Chair, is that we ought to be making provision for remission. We ought to be saying we're behind our community for those ratepayers, those households that are going to run into strife mid-year, next year, later in the year. You can come to us, you can come and talk to us about your ability to pay, and we will help you. I just think what we should have had was a bold and brave annual plan, a bold and brave opportunity to consult, and we've ended up with a meek and mild version of that. Mr. Chair, finally, we need to be very explicit that the consultation document itself references climate and climate change only in one or two spots. If we're going to go out to the marketplace, go out to our ratepayers and talk about climate smart recovery, in this document on its face, climate drifts into the ether and is not there. I'm concerned that we haven't done our job in the way we ought to have.
Okay, any other speakers? Councillor Williams.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to ensure that in adopting the consultation plan and the motion that was put, it was with the benefit of the discussion we'd have about some minor tweaks and reshaping of the wording on those options. So in supporting the motion, I just wanted to make sure it clear, be clear that was what we're talking about. And I think there are plenty of opportunities to be big, bold and brave ahead of us. We've got to operate within what an annual plan can deliver. I empathise with what Councillor Curtin has said, but I think our turn will come. So I'll just leave it there.
Confirming that we will include those minor changes.
Councillor Graham.
The material.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I think we have been big and bold and brave. We're one of the few councils in the country who has said to our ratepayers, we're going to suck in this year's rate increase. We're going to make that work off our balance sheet, and we're going to give relief for them over that period. I get that that in a year's time it may be even worse. I'm hopeful it's not. And if it is even worse, we may have to relook again. But I think this is bold. I think it's really not accurate to say that a regional council haven't been bold, not in this plan or right through this process. We led and drove the civil defence recovery. We are leading and we are driving the drought relief process. This council has really been at the forefront of everything since COVID, and we have been innovative and we have been bold, and many of the conversations which have gone around the region on how we affect recovery has been led and driven by this council, and I'm really proud to say that this plan reflects reality, but it also reflects our determination to be there for our community. So I reject most of what Councillor Curtin said. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Foley.
Yeah, I'd just like to back up what James said about the staff. Doesn't feel like anyone's been immune from the extra work required through this these last couple of months, and so in this case, the finance team's done a great job. I'd go along with Councillor Graham's comments there. I think I'm happy with this plan. It's what we can do for now. I think Councillor Curtin's taken it from a viewpoint that this is it, and this is all we've got. I think there's a lot of hard work ahead of us, and so I think this is just the start. Thanks, Chair.
Pete.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I just wish to acknowledge both Councillor Curtin and Councillor Graham's comments. As you might expect, I find support in both of those comments. So I would, however, start by saying that these were very difficult times. We're facing challenges and problems we hadn't anticipated 2 months ago. And the product and item before us now is a reflection of the flexibility and the adaptability of Hawke's Bay Regional Council to not only lead the recovery and the provision of welfare in our region over the last 6 to 8 weeks, but also for the staff of HBRC to redraw up the activities of council and to put together a consultation document that just wasn't there 6 weeks ago. So as far as Councillor Curtin's comments are concerned, I too would have loved to have seen not just HBRC, but Napier City Council and Warra District Council and a whole lot of other organisations take some big, bold moves. But these are new and uncertain and unpredictable times, and I can understand too the level of caution that people might associate to those types of activities. So, as Councillor Foley mentioned, this is the beginning of a journey that none of us can really map out, and so I look forward to working proactively with Hawke's Bay Regional Council and our iwi partners to ensure that we provide for the best solutions going forward, especially in needs of provision of welfare and the more vulnerable members of our community, but more particularly how we activate at a local level those residents and those communities to participate in environmental programs, and where our staff are able to provision and support that type of activation. I think that's where we might find more opportunities to be bold, to push the limits of our thinking, but not only that, to perhaps open-mindedly approach opportunities to approach challenges in an innovative way. So I'm really encouraged by what the staff have presented here in the short time frame they've had to turn around. It has been a massive change for some of our thinking. By extension, I issue an invitation out to our staff on behalf of the iwi members, acknowledging the work that's here. We would love to proactively start with some work and discussions with Hawke's Bay Regional Council as to how we can prepare for the LTP or the next phase. Outside of that, we look forward to circulating these informations amongst our networks and hopefully facilitating some kōrero back to the staff. Ngā mihi. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Any other people want to contribute? If not, I'll make a sum up and say that in these things, you have to work with what you've got. I disagree with Councillor Curtin on this particular issue. I wouldn't characterise it as bold or timid. I'd characterise what the council has done as considered and measured. There are so many uncertainties currently in front of us, which is very difficult to make grandiose plans, particularly when the most potent player in this area, central government, is yet to reveal exactly what they're intending to do. We've got hints and we've got some very clear indications of substantial funding being put forward with some indications of what they're looking to achieve, but those haven't quite materialised yet. And I, like Councillor Foss, just think that we just got to watch central government patiently and work out through the year what we're going to do and how we react. I think this will be judged not on our capability, our decisions, not at the beginning of this financial year with this plan, but at the end of it. That's where the market's going to be. And I think we'll be doing quite a lot of things in that area. And Councillor Graham's right. There are not many councils who have said they'll suck up the cost of continuing to do plans within their own balance sheet. So that's a pretty tough decision and a pretty good one in my book. And I'm going to wait until the end of this financial year coming to see just how well we performed. I'm going to look at it in retrospect. So with that, I'll put the resolution. All those who wish to support it, raise the thumbs. Those who are opposed, thumbs down.
The good old 8 days.
We never had 8 1-days, Neil.
There wasn't.
I declare the resolution carried, and I now hand the baton back to the chair. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Rick, and thanks for standing in with me for me. I don't know what happened. I just couldn't get back on by using all the codes, but our team, our very efficient team in the council, got me back on eventually. So we're just going to break for 10 minutes now for a cup of tea break and a stop, a refresh up, and so I'll see you all back here at 11 o'clock. That's 10 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Just leave the system running.